Well, good morning, all. This is Mr. Burns, and I'm going to give you just a few more things about Jesse James in preparation for our field trip to Devil's Gulch, where he may or may not have jumped across a gulch that's over 15 feet wide to escape a posse. Jesse James was a very complex man, as most of us are. Human behavior is not an easy thing to figure out. But we do know these things about him. He was a charismatic leader, and he was incredibly loyal to his family and his friends. This is a picture of his mother, Zerelda. He was also a Confederate, and he was from a slave owning family, and he never changed his beliefs in the Confederacy, and he never gave up on that lost cause of America being a slave owning nation. So he was kind of a rotten character in those terms. Early in his life, it was thought that he would become a minister. Definitely, he was an incredibly violent man. All right, so let's explore a little bit more about Mr. James. He did have a lot of traumas in his life. His father left the family for California to make a fortune in the gold fields, and he never came back from there. During the 1850s, he was a guerrilla fighter, and he continued that during the Civil War. He was also beaten very badly when Union troops stopped by the Missouri farm, and he never gave up his hatred for the Union and Northerners because of this. His mother, while during his criminal career, was severely wounded in a bombing, and his brother was killed in that bombing. This was all about the Pinkertons trying to capture Jesse James and his brother Frank for robbing banks. So, Bleeding Kansas, that's the period of time in the 1850s. The Civil War actually starts in Kansas well before the actual Civil War starts in 1861. Jesse and his brother Frank rode with one of the most violent guerrilla riders. His name was Bloody Bill Anderson. And with Bloody Bill, they learned how to plan these attacks. They would hit pro slavery free soil settlements. Let me say that again, free soil settlements in very fast raids, killing men and leaving as quickly as they could on horseback. And they learned that this would be a great style for robbing banks and trains and stagecoaches in the years after the Civil War. So they continued this violence on into the Civil War, and they were both, Jesse and Frank were responsible for a lot of murders during this time. So they were both killers all their adult life. Now, one of the things that helped spread their legend was this newspaper man named John Edwards. He would publish letters from Jesse James after their crimes, and Jesse would plead innocent. He would say they were nowhere near that, and this was just a like a Yankee vendetta against them. So that was what Edwards did. He would especially write stories about the James brothers not taking money from Confederate veterans or widows during these robberies. So, for 10 years, from 1866 to 1876, they were criminals, robbing banks and stagecoaches and trains. And the territory they committed a lot of their robberies in stretched from Iowa to Texas. So, 1876, that's the year their criminal career comes to an end. The James Younger gang was wiped out in the little town of Northfield, Minnesota. They were up there because they had heard that the bank in Northfield was a rich bank, and it actually had some money in it from Union General, what was his name? Butler, I think was his last name. And so they wanted to, like I said, they hated the North and they hated Union people. And so part of the reason for their raid was to get some of this money from a Union general. Another part reason for the raid was had become well known by 1876 in the territories around Missouri. So they were hoping to expand to the north. And they came to Minnesota. Well, The robbery did not go well in the bank, and the townspeople of Northfield basically blasted the bandits out of town. Two of the James gang lay dead in the streets of Northfield when the raid was over, and the townspeople chased the gang outside of the town, severely wounding most members of the James Younger gang. In fact, Cole Younger, the leader of the Younger brothers, was shot 11 times during the Northfield, Minnesota raid and their escape from Northfield. So in the very end, the gang was shot up and they were mostly captured near Madelia, Minnesota, and they would be put on trial. The younger boys would be put on trial and they would be sent to Stillwater Prison. Jesse and Frank had run away from their gang at Madelia because they weren't wounded as badly as the other men, and they left them in the field. And for a while, Jesse was living as a man named Thomas Howard in Nashville. But eventually, the call to come back to Missouri was too strong for him, and he returned to Missouri and was living near his mother and their family ranch. The governor of Missouri had put a big price on his head, and that's where Robert and Charlie Ford come in. Robert and Charlie Ford were interested in joining up with Jesse as he tried to put a new criminal gang together. But really, the Ford brothers were there to collect the bounty that the governor had put on Jesse James's head. And one day it came down to Robert Ford got the drop on Jesse and he shot him in the back and killed him. The Ford boys would be arrested for the murder and they would be put on trial in Missouri and they would be convicted of killing the popular outlaw. But the governor of Missouri intervened and pardoned him. So this is a few details on the life of Jesse James.